Welcome back to Mythbusting Monday. We have busted some myths already. Logistics is just trucks and warehouses. No, we have thought again. Behind the scenes, we've got policy, we've got planning, we've got all sorts of things that help keep the wheels turning. And today we're going to be hearing a bit more about things like shaping government decisions to make sure the industry's voice is heard loud and clear. With us to give us that insight is Josh, who works in policy at Logistics UK. He's going to help us bust some more of the big myths about logistics, explain how policy really influences the sector, and show why the behind the scenes work matters more than you think. Welcome, Josh.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about you.
So thank you for the kind introduction. My name is Josh Fenton. I'm a policy manager at Logistics UK, responsible for trade, customs and borders, as well as the policy lead for Wales and the southwest of England.
What is policy?
Oh, that's the $1 million question. So policy is essentially how governments set, if they have an ambition to do something, the way that is set is by setting a policy. It's almost like a plan of how something's achieved. So, if someone might say, we want to hit net zero by 2050, that's the policy headline. But within that target, there will then also be a lot of outcomes and deliverables. So things that basically have to be achieved to make that a reality. So that would sort of be the policy. And then within, can you get down into more of a detail? You can look at like how you can make sort of changes to policy so you've got a better chance of achieving your overall objective. And that's kind of really what policy is. It's ideas really, and then setting things into motion.
Fantastic. So behind the scenes, but as we said in the intro, very important. And was your dream at school or college to go into logistics policy?
The honest answer would have to be probably not. I think like most people, logistics is seen as something that you just always take for granted, and policy is not really something that is at the forefront of a mind when I was at school and college. So I have to say the honest answer is probably not, but actually the things that I do in my job, I actually really enjoy. So had I been aware of this type of career, probably would have been much more of interest. I've always had an interest in decision making and politics and those sorts of things, and that's part of the job that we do, but also very much interested in getting something from A to B and problem solving, which is basically what the bread and butter of what logistics is.
Certainly is. We've heard a lot about that already today and more to come across the week. Tell us a bit about your journey then. How did you get from, let's say, 16 to what you're doing today?
So 16, I finished my GCSEs. I then did A-levels. I did A-level history, English and media studies. Just like those subjects at the time. I then did a diploma in business. So did the 1-year course in that. Decided to go to university, studied business management in Liverpool. And then took some time off, did a little bit of traveling, did a little bit of work experience, and then decided to go and do a master's degree. And this was in international business and management in Manchester. And then after that, unfortunately, that's when the pandemic struck. So sort of thinking of my options for a career, and in all honesty, a lot of the organizations weren't recruiting at that time. And I thought, well, do you know what? I'll go for what is recruiting, and that turned out to be the civil service. So I went into a role in the civil service, which is based in Westminster. Didn't actually have to go to Westminster all that often because we were working from home. I was working on trade issues within the government, and then after a couple of did a full year there, and then I moved on to transport and did a couple of different roles within transport. And then the opportunity came up to join Logistics UK, and that sort of combines my interest in government and policy, as well as trade and transport, and sort of brought that all together. So it seemed like quite a natural transition to come across to Logistics UK.
Fantastic. So quite a wiggly career journey if you think about what you were studying at A-levels, right the way through to where you are today. But certainly those degrees both very relevant, as you say, to what you do now. If we think about some of the skills, so we talked about, I guess, subjects with international business in particular. What about skills, mindsets or skills that you think young people need to join the sector and help to shape that future of logistics?
It might surprise everyone to know that logistics is actually quite people focused. There's a lot of teamwork, a lot of, the supply chain is very often very large, which means you're sort of working across a number of different teams to get something from inception to a customer shelf. So sort of having interpersonal skills, being able to communicate with others is obviously a very big asset. I think being able to break down steps into smaller parts, so not just focusing on the end result, but actually what are the steps that we need to do to get it from that point, and sort of ticking them off and compartmentalizing as well is kind of helpful. So those are probably the main ones. But yeah, communication is actually a lot more involved in the job than people might realize. If you've got an issue, that you speak to the people that can help you fix it, or just keeping everyone informed within the supply chain is a massive part of actually keeping logistics efficient.
And we will see an example now of Daisy, who works in policy at the UK Warehousing Association. We will take a look at a week in her life, backing up some of the points there that Josh has made about being out and about and lots of communication.
Welcome to a week in the life of a policy and research analyst working for the UK Warehousing Association. So this day I woke up pretty early to attend the Women in Logistics conference in the Midlands. Great day consisting of some really interesting speakers and a visit to Nestlé's fully automated warehouse run by GXO. And the next day was a work from home day, which was great to catch up with some emails in addition to the rest of the policy team, before I attended CPRE, the Countryside Charity virtual solar event. There was a variety of discussions, the most noticeable being a panel debate which featured UKWA's Chief Exec Claire Bottle, in addition to the Green Party's leader Caroline Lucas. It was a really interesting debate and I learned loads of new things. Then finally, I had the brilliant opportunity to attend the Cold Chain Federation's parliamentary reception. It's always really exciting to have the opportunity to visit Parliament, in addition to it being a great event. It was a really good opportunity to catch up with some people I hadn't seen in a while, in addition to some networking to meet some new people.
Okay, that was Daisy at UKWA. As we've said, backing up everything that Josh has said about policy being an interesting place to work and something that really does require those strong communication skills. You talked about earlier thinking about what the role of policy, what it is that we do, communication with government, communicating with our members, and a lot of that, I assume, has to be quite future focused. What do you think are the upcoming trends in the logistics sector?
So it probably won't come as a surprise to everyone that decarbonisation is a big trend. So the transport sector, which includes logistics, is a massive emitter and contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, and therefore there's a significant challenge for all transport modes to decarbonise to hit net zero climate change targets. Unfortunately, it's not as easy so far for logistics. The larger the vehicles, the technology is either extremely expensive or doesn't actually exist yet. So whilst this is again how our role sort of comes in, so that a policy has been set for the future, but the pathway to achieve that policy is still to be determined. And that's sort of where people like myself come in to advise government of where challenges are, and what sort of actions they need from government, and also the other stakeholders involved in the process, where they need to actually make concessions or help or support or anything really that gives industry confidence to know that they're making the right decision. So yeah, decarbonisation is an ongoing challenge, and it will probably be for years to come. What other trends, I suppose, is that I have to say the role of tech as well within everything. So if you looked back a number of years ago, you probably wouldn't have thought there would be things like assisted driving, or all of the systems that you see in your car. So things like seatbelt warnings or hazard light warnings, or there's things that you have that help control steering, that show if you've maybe if you've gone off the road. All those sort of things are future. But back in the day, they would have thought those things were almost impossible. Today they're almost seen as the norm. But actually going forward into the future, we could see more automation within logistics. So that could look like driverless cars, driverless vans, driverless HGVs, which I think sounds far-fetched, but actually that's the way that it's going. We're also seeing trials happening with drones, where particularly in rural areas or areas that are quite difficult to deliver to, or if something needs to be sent out immediately, the fastest way maybe to get to that person or to get it to that customer is to send it via a drone. So we could start seeing in the future a lot more drones used for logistics deliveries, particularly the smaller parcels or things like pharmaceuticals that need to get out quickly. So those are sort of some of the trends that we're sort of seeing at the moment. But I suppose there's always things happening in logistics. It's always changing. So I'm sure there'll be a lot more trends in the near future.
Definitely. And I think that's something that's really exciting for our audience, I think, coming in and thinking about how they can be part of that change, whether that's designing the technology, whether that's jobs like we do in policy, where the government, as Josh has said, might say, we want drone activity in certain areas, and we get to listen to members and sort of think about how that might support them or might challenge them, and perhaps if they're airport owners, for example. But bringing all of that future tech, all of that sustainability together is a huge part of Josh's role, which, yeah, it's a good one. It's an exciting one. And I think it's something that we really don't necessarily consider when we think about careers in logistics, is that behind the scenes side of it. You've shared with us perhaps one of the things that might surprise the students watching this, in that logistics is a very people-centred sector. Anything else that you think might surprise the students watching?
So I suppose if you think a couple of years ago we had a pandemic, kind of, right, there was obviously a scary time for a lot of people, and you probably think there was key workers that were classified at that time, and you probably think of nurses, doctors, firefighters, police officers, but you might be surprised to know that actually logistics were considered critical and therefore given key worker status. And that's because people in our sector are the people that make sure that there's food on the shelves. They make sure that everything that you would need to have to live a normal life is available. I'm sure during that time as well there would have been a lot more online deliveries. Well, that's only made possible through the logistics sector. And what we would see if we didn't have a logistics sector that was operating at that time, or any time, given today, is you would start seeing issues where you wouldn't be able to get what you want, or if you did get it, it would take a lot longer. Mm-hmm. So I think people would be surprised to know that logistics works 24/7. You place an order, and overnight people are working to make sure it gets to you on time. I think that's pretty exciting, and probably something that people take for granted in today's sort of next day delivery, click and collect as well.
And we did feel that so acutely, didn't we, during COVID, when we couldn't pop to the shops or whatever it is that we might do. And it works in the reverse as well. It's not only having things delivered to us, it's having things picked up. If there was no logistics operation, no transport planning, our rubbish bins wouldn't get collected.
Exactly
absolutely right. Everything is logistics, and that's really something to consider, particularly in moments of national crisis like the pandemic, or like a flood situation or disaster recovery, which again, a hugely hidden part of the sector, and one where people have to galvanise themselves into action quite quickly to make sure the right thing is at the right place at the right time. So, final question from me. If we've got people watching thinking, okay, this has piqued my interest, hopefully they're going to watch a little more over the course of Generation Logistics Week. But what would you say to them if there's young people out there thinking, maybe logistics is for me and I might want to follow in Josh's footsteps?
Well, I'd say certainly look, there's a lot of resources out there to look into it. I think one of the best things about a career in logistics is there's so many roles that you can have, and at any point. So people leaving at 16, there's a role. People leaving at 18, there's a role. People that do a degree, there's a role. Or if you wanted to retrain later in life, there's a role. And whatever point that you enter into the logistics sector, there's always a pathway if you want to take it. It's such a varied career if you want it to be. I think that's quite an exciting prospect. And like if I think back to whenever I was at college, there was I didn't really understand it to the point where I do today. And I think that's quite exciting. There's not many lines of work where the roles can be so varied. My role is probably considered to be quite niche, but still an important part in the wider cog of what logistics does. Similar to your role, similar to they're similar to the role of a driver, role of a warehouse worker, supply chain manager, right the way up. And it's an important part that underpins the UK economy. So you actually feel a lot of satisfaction knowing that you're part of something that means a lot to the rest of the UK. And that's quite a rewarding thing.
That's brilliant. Absolutely, that purpose. It's what gets us out of bed in the morning, keeps us working, definitely. And I think being curious, being open-minded about that variety of jobs, hugely, hugely important. So thank you, Josh. Thank you for joining us. More of these sessions over the course of Generation Logistics Week, so do stay tuned. And thank you for joining us for Mythbusting Monday.
Thank you.